Step 6, learning to build cell power. Welcome to Step 6. There are 3 ways to build your cell power. The first way is to increase your mitochondrial energy. This is the power plants of your cells. The second way is to decrease oxidative stress. This is the aging process of your cells. And finally, the third way is to increase cell repair. This is the rebuilding process of your cells. Mitochondrial health has been a huge topic of discussion over the last 3 to 5 years. In this book, Fat for Fuel, by Dr. Joseph Mercola, he coins the term mitochondrial metabolic therapy. This term is used for you to understand how to build your cell power by increasing the amount of good fuel that you put into your body. And we'll be talking a lot about this during this entire series. So what the heck is a mitochondria anyway? There are literally thousands of mitochondria in almost every cell of your body. Your heart cells have the most mitochondria per cell. There is more than 5,000 mitochondria per each heart cell. And this is because they need the most energy because the heart cells, of course, are working the hardest out of any cells in your body. Researchers have found that the mitochondria make up about 10% of your total body weight of your body. So even though these microscopic power plants are inside your cells, they make up about 10% of your total body weight. And you think these things are small? 1 billion mitochondria will fit on the head of a pin. So why are the mitochondria so important? Because the mitochondria combine the nutrients from sugars and from fat with the oxygen within your blood to produce energy inside your cells. This energy is created in the form of a substance called ATP. Literally billions and billions of ATP molecules are made every second. Your mitochondria produce about 110 pounds of ATP every day that are then burned up and then recycled. If you did not have mitochondria, you would be dead. The mitochondria produce energy involving the 2 most important biological functions that you do every day. You breathe and you eat. The mitochondria marry those 2 important biological functions and turn those functions into the energy that you need to stay healthy, to be healthy in the future, and to have a greater life. So when mitochondria combine sugar or fat with oxygen to produce energy, this process is called oxidative phosphorylation. And this is really important because when the glucose or fat combine with the oxygen to create energy, an extra oxygen molecule is produced. And this causes something that is called free radicals. These free radicals are also called ROS, or reactive oxygen species. When these free radicals react with other molecules, you can basically create biological rust in your body. And biological rust speeds up the aging process. When these specialized free radicals, reactive oxygen species, react with other molecules, you could actually cause biological rust. Yeah, that's right. You actually rust inside your cells. And this speeds up the aging process. And as you can imagine, when you create biological rust inside your cell, These reactive oxygen species can also damage your DNA, which is the nuclear material inside your cell. And approximately 90% of your reactive oxygen species is produced inside of your mitochondria. So we have all been afraid of free radicals or reactive oxygen species for a very long time. But there is actually positive effects on your mitochondria from these free radicals. What they have shown over the last 5 to 10 years is that you don't have to be afraid of all the free radicals or reactive oxygen species because you need to have them at some degree to stay healthy. But you need to have the right balance of ROS in the cells, and this will allow you to stay healthy. So now that you understand that you do need free radicals, the answer to have the positive effects of the free radicals in your mitochondria is to getting and keeping the right balance to produce as few of reactive oxidative species as you can, but not to get rid of all of them all the time. So over the last few years, what has shown to be able to keep the balance between too many and not enough reactive oxygen species is to eat a diet high in good fat and low in net carbohydrates. And net carbohydrates are the total carbohydrates minus the amount of soluble fiber. Then also add enough protein, an adequate amount of protein, because if you eat this combination of foods, you produce less reactive oxygen species, but you produce enough to keep you healthy. When you eat a diet that is high in good fat, your mitochondria produce something that's called ketones instead of reactive oxygen species. And so when you eat enough good fat, you decrease the amount of ROS, but you increase the amount of ketones, and ketones do not contribute to the inflammation inside the cell. The last important effect to have on the mitochondria and to create a positive effect on the mitochondria is when you eat less sugar. Because when you eat less sugar, there is a 30 to 40% drop in the amount of reactive oxygen species that you produce. So as we continue to look at the 3 ways to build cell power, once you understand that by increasing the mitochondrial energy, the mitochondria is the power plant of the cell and produces something called ATP. And the ATP, when it is burned by the cell to create energy, it creates and liberates an oxygen molecule. And this oxygen molecule can basically cause biological rust. And this biological rust is in the form of a reactive oxidative species. And as we've also just discussed, there has to be a balance between the biological amount of ROSs and the chemical amount of oxidation that is going on inside of your cells. So making sure that your balance is proper allows you to stay healthy for a lifetime. So let's look at the different types of reactive oxidative species. First, you have the biological or good type of ROS. These species occur inside the cell. They are compatible with cell physiology. They're activated only when needed, and they are driven by enzyme activity that is constantly renewed. These good or biological types of reactive oxidative species must be in balance with the chemical or bad types of oxidative species. And these bad ones are uncertain access to the cell. You have no idea what they're going to do once they get inside the cell. They could have a detrimental effect. They may also interfere with the cell's physiology. They're always activated. These are when toxins get into your cell and create extra oxygen that create havoc all throughout your cells. And then these chemicals are so readily depleted and limited, and then it has to be renewed all the time, that many times when this whole process starts, it comes to a very abrupt end and causes even further damage to the cell. So what are the 5 different ways that you reduce the bad reactive oxidative species? We've already talked a little bit about diet, but you can also decrease the bad ROSs by using whole food supplements, specific herbs, getting a better lifestyle, and increasing the amount of exercise that you have. So now let's focus on how you can decrease the bad reactive oxidative species with your diet. The first way to do it is to eat plenty of good, healthy fats. The second way is to eat the foods that will keep your blood sugar more stable, and we'll talk about that more later. The third way is to eat whole foods that do not contain any food additives. Another way to decrease the bad ROS with diet is to eat more organic foods that have not been exposed to pesticides or herbicides. You can also add whole food supplements to your diet when you can't get enough of these kinds of foods in what you eat or in any other way. And then finally, you can use specific complete herbs to target different areas that you need extra help with. And this brings me to the largest battleground of diet in the 21st century. And I'm here to tell you that we all need to eat more fat in our diet. I know what you're thinking. We've all been told we've needed to eat less fat, especially since the 1950s. But now look at our health. Our overall health is declined over the last 70 years to the point where we're one of the sickest populations this world has ever seen. So you might be wondering how I have got to this conclusion. And so I'm going to give you a little history lesson. Back in the late 1800s, the American dinner table was full of whole foods, baked goods, and butchered meats taken directly from the family farm. Then in 1898, Kellogg developed the cornflakes, and Heinz and Libby and Campbell's had all been canning foods for decades, but none of them had really taken hold and started the whole processed food trend. The processed food revolution really started in 1899 when Wesson introduced deodorized cottonseed oil, which is a waste product of the cotton industry. The cotton industry had produced cottonseed oil for a very long time and had nothing to do with this extra product that they were producing. So they decided to see if they could sell it as a food product. Cottonseed oil is a polyunsaturated fatty acid, or put simply, it's called a PUFA. And most vegetable oils are polyunsaturated fatty acids. But the problem is with these PUFAs, like cottonseed oil, is that these oils can be attacked by the extra free radicals if the balance between the good and the bad ROS is not proper, and can lead to cell damage. But back in 1899, they didn't even understand what a PUFA was, or that there was extra free radicals and that the balance between the good and the bad ROS was so important. So they just created these oils because they had the products and they needed to sell them. So for 8 years, they had this oil, but they couldn't figure out how to make it stable so that then they could sell it and increase the shelf life. So in 1907, Procter & Gamble finally developed a way to add hydrogen to the cottonseed oil to make it solid and more stable for shipping and to increase its shelf life. This is the birth of Crisco. So for the next 43 years, there was a steady increase in the amount of vegetable oils, especially cottonseed oil, that was being consumed by the average American. By 1950, the average American was eating about 20 pounds of an industrial processed fat per year. Or in other words, eating 20 pounds of polyunsaturated fatty acids that were causing free radical damage and leading to further cell damage. So, over the last 70 years, we have all been eating way too much polyunsaturated fats, and this has led to the increase in chronic disease that we've all experienced in our lifetime. So this brings me to, why in the world am I proposing that you need to eat more fat and that more fat is good for you? Because the fat that I'm talking about is called saturated fat or monounsaturated fat. And we'll explain this a little bit more in a minute. But what you need to know is that these two types of fats are extremely important for your overall health. So why do I think that eating good fat is so good for you? The first reason is that your brain is made up of approximately 70% saturated fat. And this is important for two reasons. The first reason is that the fat is stable at room temperature and it absorbs toxins and allows those toxins to stay in the fat and not cause trouble with the brain function. The second reason is that fat is an extremely good insulator of the nerves. And so if there's plenty of fat around the nerves, your brain function remains great. Another reason that eating good fat is important for you is fat protects all of your vital organs within your body. Fat acts as a cushion. And it also acts to absorb toxins, just like it does in your brain. But if you have enough good fat to protect all your vital organs, your ability to stay healthy is increased. Another reason eating good fat is important is that fat is essential for proper hormone balance, especially in women. When women lose all of their essential fat, it wreaks havoc on their female hormone system and creates all kinds of problems with fertility and with stress management. You also need to eat enough good fat because without enough fat in your diet, you will experience sugar and carbohydrate cravings because fat makes you feel full. If you don't eat enough fat, you will have sugar and carbohydrate cravings, which will lead to blood sugar problems, which can lead to chronic inflammation and lead to you becoming fat. Another reason you need to have enough good fat in your diet is that fat is necessary for you to absorb all of your fat-soluble vitamins, vitamins A, E, and D. If you don't have enough good fat in your diet, you will not absorb enough of these fat-soluble vitamins, which are all extremely important in decreasing your inflammation and increasing your vitality and making you feel better, and live longer. So this brings me to what inevitably happens, and you need to know which fats are actually good for you. So as I've already mentioned, saturated fats and monounsaturated fats are the two types of fats that you need to eat on a regular basis. A high-quality saturated fat includes unrefined virgin coconut oil, grass-fed or organic butter, ghee, which is another name for clarified butter, organic whole milk, if you can find it raw, that is the best, or all of the naturally occurring fats found in grass-fed meat. The second type of good fat that you need to be eating is high-quality monounsaturated fats. But the problem with these kinds of fats and oils is that they become damaged when you heat them up. So when you're cooking and you're using extra virgin olive oil, do not heat those oils very much at all. Just maybe saute the vegetables or the meat that you're cooking. Because if you heat those oils up too much, it damages those oils and turns them into a polyunsaturated fat, which is a bad fat. So the high quality monounsaturated fats include extra virgin olive oil, sesame seed or other nut oils like peanut oil. You can also get high quality monounsaturated fats from eating raw nuts and seeds, eating avocados, or using flaxseed oil. Now that you understand the types of fats you should be eating, what kinds of fats should you avoid at all costs? You should avoid all hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated oils. These are another way to say your trans fats. And we've all learned over the last 10 years that trans fats are bad for you. Now we understand why, because what they do is they get into the cells and they wreak havoc on your mitochondria and decrease the amount of energy you can produce. So some common examples of hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated fats and oils are margarine, Crisco, like we've talked about before, the buttery spreads like I can't believe it's not butter, those kinds of things, and all the vegetable oils, the canola oil, the corn oil, and the soybean oil. So it has literally been over the last 5 to 10 years that we have come to understand that saturated fats and monounsaturated fats are not bad for us. We have all been told for the last 120 years that these two types of fats are not good for us and can cause heart disease. But now we understand from the science that that's just not the case. And that all of these hydrogenated and partially hydrogenated fats that we thought were good for us over the last 120 years are actually leading to decrease in energy, increasing the inflammation, and causing further disease. This brings us to the third and final way to build your cell power. The first way is to increase your energy production. The second way is to decrease the oxidative stress, or the stress that is put on the cell. And the third and final way is to increase your cell repair ability. And the best way to make sure that you increase the amount of cell repair that is going on is to stimulate different types of receptors that are found on the cell membrane. In order to increase the amount of cell repair that goes on in your body, your cell membranes have what's called receptors on them. And these receptors act like a lock. And each one of these locks has a key that needs to be put into that cell membrane that then can be linked to genetic expression, to metabolic control, or how well your metabolism is working. You also have scheduled cell death. In other words, cells get old and they die, and that is a normal part of your cell repair process. And then finally, these receptors also turn on and off cell survival. These receptors or locks that are found on the cell membrane are also extremely important to turn on and turn off DNA repair and development. Your DNA is the code of your life. If your DNA is working correctly, you stay healthy. If your DNA is damaged, you can become sick very quickly. These receptors on the cell membrane, or the locks on the cell membrane, also decrease inflammation and increase the nerve protection and healthy aging of those cells. So if your locks are full of the proper key, you decrease the inflammation, you increase the protection of the nerves, and you age gracefully. There are also types of receptors or locks on the cell membrane that protect the cell from decreasing danger signals. And this danger signal is only been discovered over the last 10 years. And this is part of your immune response. If you have too many of these danger signals being put out into the cellular space right outside the cell, then you have more inflammation and your immune response becomes hyperactive and it could lead to a disease. But there are certain types of receptors or locks that if you put the right kind of key into that lock on the cell membrane, it decreases the number of danger signals and allows your cells to repair themselves properly. The receptors on these cells also increase what is called heat shock proteins. And the easy way to think about heat shock proteins is that it is the carrier of your proper cell repair process. So now that you understand how to increase the cellular repair process in these receptors, what is the best way to turn these receptors on? Recent research has shown that there is 3 different ways to turn on these receptors. The first way to put the right key in the lock of your cell membrane is by fasting. Intermittent fasting has been shown to increase the activity of these receptors and helps keep your blood sugar receptors stay sharp and working correctly. The second way to stimulate these receptors is by eating specific foods or using specific supplements. Resveratrol, quercetin, and butene are 3 different substances that are all found in nature that turn up the amount of cell repair and help you age gracefully. The third and final way to increase cellular repair is through exercise. It also turns on these receptors and makes your body heal faster. You remain more responsive to your blood sugar, and it repairs your DNA inside the nucleus of your cell more completely. As I have previously mentioned, we also need to decrease the danger signals coming from inside the cells. This helps to increase the cell repair process. It is no surprise that all of our cells face challenges every day, and they send out danger signals into the tissues surrounding those cells to tell the other cells around that there could be a problem. These danger signals are also called alarmins. And the more alarmins there are, the greater the immune and inflammation response that there is. And the more likely it is that your body will have too much inflammation and cause chronic inflammation over time. Dead and dying cells are also a major source of danger signals or alarmins, especially the cells that are dying too early. So if you are having trouble with toxins or your body is just not healthy, you produce more alarmins, and this leads to more danger signals, which can lead to health issues down the road. So this brings us to the final way that your receptors on your cell membranes help you increase the amount of cell repair that goes on. And this is by increasing the number of what's called heat shock proteins that are delivered to the insides of your cell. Heat shock proteins are stimulated when the receptor on the cell membrane is activated, and heat shock proteins deliver other proteins to different parts of the cells. There are two major roles of heat shock proteins. The first is to keep the carried proteins in the right order. You need to make sure that you have the right proteins delivered in the right order to make sure that your cells continue to work correctly. The second major role of heat shock proteins is to help to activate the immune response if there's an invader that is there. These proteins turn on the immune response when necessary, but also turn it off when the intruder is killed to keep from creating too much inflammation and leading to other problems. So now you understand that there is 3 different ways to build your cell power. The first is you have to increase the power inside the cell by making sure your mitochondria, or the power plant of the cell, is working properly. The second way then is to decrease the amount of rust that occurs because of the power that is being produced. And then finally, the third way is to make sure that you can increase the amount of cell repair that goes on so that then the cells remain healthy as you remain healthy. What do you really need to know about step 6? You really need to know that there are 3 ways to build your cell power. Number 1, you increase the number of mitochondria, which are the power plants of the cell. Number 2, you decrease the biological rusting of the cell by decreasing the oxygen stress that is placed on the cell. And then finally, the third way to build cell power is to increase your cell's ability to repair itself. When your cells are working better, you slow down the aging process and you look better, feel better, and live longer.